Hey guys, pull out another weird one from my handgun collection to talk about today. This one is the Cobray Pocket Pal. Unfortunately, I don't really know anything about these guns. There's nothing online about them as far as their history and everything, and to be honest, I'm not even sure if it's made by Cobray. It has a Cobray stamp on the grip right there, but the barrel actually says PPI. And then the box, here's the warranty card that came with it, the instructions, which are on a sheet of paper. They say PPI limited warranty. There's a box for you. It says model PP, PPI. So I'm really not too clear on who exactly made this. If I had to guess, I think it's Cobray, but if I had to guess, it was made probably in the late 80s, early 90s, something like that. It looks like that style of gun when there were a lot of kind of goofball designs coming out of these small manufacturers. So unfortunately, I'm not really going to be able to get into a lot of the details in the background and the backstory and all that. So this review will be mostly about just my impressions of the gun and just sort of my experience with it. So what makes this gun really interesting, I mean, it obviously is pretty strange looking, is that it shoots 380 ACP and 22 long rifle out of the same gun. And the way it does that, it has two barrels, 380 barrels on top and the 22 long rifle barrels on the bottom. It could also shoot 22 shorts or any other 22 rimfire caliber. But so you can shoot two different calibers out of it. Let me focus that again. It's a break top revolver. You might be asking where the cylinder is. It's inside there. So I'll break this open. Right now I've got the 380 cylinder in there, and there's the 22. But I'll get into the loading and all that in a little bit. So you break it open like that using this lever here, and kind of looks a lot like a cop in my opinion. The COP 357 Derringer, which I also have and I pulled out just to do a little comparison there, but kind of has the same look and feel to it. So I wonder if there's any sort of inspiration, if this thing was sort of inspired by that at all, which if you're not familiar with this, it's the 4-barrel Derringer, which I've also done a review on, so check for that. But they're strikingly similar, I think, so I wonder, if there was any kind of collaboration there or what happened there. But anyway, moving on. I'll start off with the ergonomics. The ergonomics were surprisingly good out of the box. I was pretty surprised by that. The grip, it feels pretty good in my hand. It settles in nicely. There's this part here, it really sits into my hand well. The sights are better than I thought they'd be also. Try to get that in focus for you. There's the rear sights, just straight iron sights, and then up to the front. You can see that. But side picture is actually better than I thought it would be. So the ergonomics are surprisingly good. It weighs about 20 ounces, which in a gun this small, it's 20 ounces isn't that heavy, but in a gun this small it feels really dense and really compact, so it feels heavier than it really actually is, at 20 ounces. As far as size goes, I also pulled out my 70s era Beretta 92, which is probably one of my most common guns, just to sort of give you an idea of just how big the Pocket Pal is. So it's a pretty small gun. It's definitely something you can slip in your pocket. Weight aside, it is kind of heavy for that, but so I'll show you the other side too. I don't think I've showed you that really. And there you can see where it says PPI on the barrel, and it's kind of funny, I think, that it was made in Ducktown. It's kind of a funny name for a place for a gun to be manufactured. Shooting it, I'll get into that now, because that's really the most interesting part about this gun. Because what makes this gun really interesting is the fact that you can change out the cylinders and shoot two different calibers. So, like I showed you before, you pop it open, and you have your 380 cylinder right in there right now. Pull the trigger to pull it out. I'll show you the reloading procedure before I get into all the shooting details. If you look inside, you'll see there's this pin that sticks up, and it's attached to the trigger. And when you pull the trigger back, that's how the cylinder is rotating. I'll let you look at the cylinder a little better. There's a groove on there, and that pin sits in that groove. And to rotate the cylinder, every time you pull it back, it's sliding through this groove and forcing the cylinder to turn. So it's really pretty simple, but it works. It does contribute to a pretty bad trigger, which I'll get into in a minute, but the 22 cylinder works the same way. It's got these grooves etched into it. And so to load it, you just have to, there's that pin on the bottom, 6 o'clock. On the cylinders, on both of them, there's a notch cut out in the bottom. You just have to put that in the 6 o'clock position to get it to go in, and when you do, it slides in like that. And you'll know if you didn't load it correctly, and it's important that you do, because the way it fires is there are 2 firing pins, the 380 on top, the 22 on the bottom, and they both drop every single time you pull the trigger. So the gun just won't work at all if you don't have this lined up, and honestly you can't really mess it up, because what happens if you don't have the cylinder lined up correctly when you put it in, like let's say you're not paying attention, you just put it in anyway, it doesn't go in all the way, so you can't close the gun. So there's really not much danger of that. But so what I usually do, I just put it in however, and then just kind of twist it slowly and let it fall in. So now it's aligned correctly, and then you just pull this up, close it, and you're ready to go. Now I mentioned the trigger; it's really bad. A lot of that is due, it's pretty heavy, but a lot of that's also due to that pin having to travel the entire length of the cylinder to get it to turn. So it's really long also, and you'll hear a little click here in a second. That click there, that's considered to be a safety feature according to the manual, which I think because this thing it's called a Pocket Pal, I'm assuming it's intended to be carried in the pocket. That's probably some sort of audible safety, so you know if the trigger's getting pulled or something. But anyway, so you keep pulling it, and at this point it's really heavy. You can't tell obviously on a camera, but it's pretty heavy. And then keep going a little bit farther, and then it goes. And just now it dropped both the 380 pin and the 22 pin underneath. And again, and I probably should have put the 380 in just so I could do this faster. But what else is interesting? After your 5 rounds of 22 or 3 rounds of 380, it stops on its own because sort of at the end of the line, so to speak, it hits just a brick wall. See, it's kind of hard to do this through the camera for the viewfinder, but once it hits the end there, the continuation of that groove stops, so you can't pull the trigger anymore. It's just stuck in that hole, and at that point you have to reload. Reloading is quite cumbersome and awkward. As I showed you before, you pull the trigger, pull this out. At this point you'll have 5 spent casings in there, and the only way to get them out is to pry them out with your fingernail. Sometimes I stick a little stick in there and tap them out, but it's pretty slow, kind of annoying. So it's not the best, it's not tactical in any way. Shooting it, as far as actual shooting impressions go, aside from the trigger and everything and the reloading, 22 is actually, it feels pretty decent. It's the gun's accurate enough. 380 does snap quite a bit, but it's pretty accurate. Sight picture's not too bad on it. So I was actually surprised with that. I was definitely keeping things on target better than I thought I would, especially compared to the COP, the 357 Derringer, which has a terrible trigger, and it's also horribly inaccurate, and it's incredibly painful to shoot. So this one I was kind of expecting, because of the visual similarity, that they'd be similar to shoot, but I was pleasantly surprised by it as far as how shooting goes. So moving on to criticisms, there's several really. The gun, got it as a novelty. That's pretty much all it's good for, but if it was ever intended to be practical in any way, it's pretty bad at that. The trigger pull is awful. It's pretty heavy for its size. I mean, I don't think there were ever any holsters for it or anything, so it really was intended for a pocket carry probably, and it's kind of heavy for that. Reloading is awful and awkward and all of that, so there are a lot of criticisms about it really. Also, the finish quality is pretty poor. The cylinders themselves are pretty well made in my opinion. They seem like really solid stainless steel or whatever kind of steel they're made out of, but the finish on the gun itself, I don't know if this will show up very well, how close I can get this. You can sort of see, it looks like pitting sort of underneath the finish of it, and the only other pictures of these guns I've seen on the internet all have this sort of going on, but it just doesn't really look like a high quality production piece. Would have been nice if it was a nice nickel finish or something, you know, and maybe not these plastic grips, maybe some wood or something. Just a little bit of something else would have made this gun at least feel a little nicer or look a little nicer. But like I said, the cylinders are made well, so I'm not really afraid of it blowing up in my hand or anything. But that is just sort of another knock against it. It just looks and feels cheap. So Like I said, a lot of criticisms against the gun, but really in the end it comes down to being a novelty gun. That's just pretty. I got it because it's so interesting and unique. They're pretty hard to find actually, and part of the reason I'm making this video, I just looked on Gunbroker recently and I actually saw one for sale, and it was the first one I'd seen I think in at least a year on there. You just never see them. I have no idea what kind of numbers these were produced in, but it must have been really few, because I just never see anybody on forums having them. Doesn't seem like anyone really owns one out there, so I don't know where they all went, how many they made, anything like that. But really tough to find. If I had to establish a market value, looking at past auctions, it seems like they go for 300s, something like that. But really, like I said, since they're so rare, it kind of just comes down to whatever someone's willing to pay. They're not, they're not really well made and all that, so you wouldn't expect them to go that high. But the rarity and the uniqueness of it, maybe contributes to a little bit higher price. So, in conclusion, it's an interesting gun. If you find one for a decent price, and by decent I mean under $300, you might consider picking one up just for the novelty of it, especially if you're into weird stuff like me. But it's not really practical for anything at all. Unless you could easily carry this in a pocket as just a strange little backup or something. But yeah. So, just a weird little gun. I haven't seen anything online about it. It's definitely no YouTube video, so maybe my fellow weird gun fans would be interested in seeing this thing. I'll show you the barrels again there. Sort of its key weirdness feature. So yeah, it's the Cobray Pocket Pal, or PPI Pocket Pal, made in Ducktown, Pennsylvania. Who knows when, but pretty interesting little firearm here. So thanks for watching.